Daniel Harper hadn't returned to his hometown in nearly 6 years. Life had pulled him toward another state, another career, another routine. The only reason he drove back now was because of a phone call he had dreaded for years. His father, Thomas Harper, had died unexpectedly after suffering a heart attack while repairing a neighbor's roof. At 64, Thomas was known by everyone as the man who never refused to help. Daniel admired him, but they had never been especially close. His father had always been quiet, the kind of man who listened more than he spoke. The funeral drew almost the entire town. Former co-workers, neighbors, teachers, firefighters, and people Daniel had never seen before lined up to pay their respects. They all seemed to have a story about his father. He fixed my porch without charging me. He drove me to the hospital during a snowstorm. He helped my son find his first job. Daniel smiled politely, wondering how one man had touched so many lives while rarely talking about any of it at home. As the cemetery slowly emptied, he remained standing beside the fresh grave with his mother. She quietly squeezed his hand before walking toward the car, leaving him alone for a moment. That's when he noticed a woman standing several yards away. She looked to be in her early 50s, dressed in a dark blue coat, holding a small bouquet of white lilies. Daniel was certain he had never seen her before. She waited until everyone else had left. Then she slowly approached. "Are you Daniel?" she asked softly. "Yes." She looked at the gravestone before meeting his eyes. "Your father saved my life." Daniel expected her to continue, but she remained silent. Instead, she reached into her purse and handed him a thick cream-colored envelope sealed with dark blue wax. On the front, written in his father's familiar handwriting, were 6 words. "Only give this to Daniel." Before he could ask a single question, the woman stepped back. "He asked me to wait until after his funeral." "Who are you?" Daniel asked, her eyes filled with tears. "Someone who owes your father everything." Then she walked away without looking back. Daniel called after her, but she disappeared through the cemetery gates. That evening, he placed the envelope on the kitchen table. His mother stared at it in confusion. "I've never seen that before," she admitted. Daniel carefully broke the wax seal. Inside was a handwritten letter and a small brass key attached to a tag marked Box 214. The letter contained only a few lines. "Daniel, if you're reading this, it means I never found the courage to tell you myself. The key opens a safety deposit box at Harper County Bank. Everything inside belongs to you now. Before you judge me, promise you'll read every page. There are truths that make less sense when discovered halfway." Daniel looked at his mother. "Did Dad ever rent a safety deposit box?" She slowly shook her head. "Not that I know of." The next morning, they drove to the bank together. The manager checked the records and quietly led them into the vault. Box 214 hadn't been opened in almost 8 years. Inside were dozens of neatly labeled envelopes, photographs tied with faded blue ribbon, receipts dating back more than 20 years, and a leather journal. Resting on top was a picture of Thomas standing beside the same woman from the cemetery. Daniel felt his stomach tighten. The photograph wasn't romantic, but it was personal enough to raise questions. Beneath it lay years of bank transfer receipts made to someone named Grace Miller, every month, without fail, sometimes hundreds of dollars, sometimes thousands. Daniel looked at his mother. She had turned pale. "Who is Grace?" he whispered. She couldn't answer. There were birthday cards signed only with the letter T, school tuition receipts, hospital bills marked paid, and photographs of a young girl growing into adulthood. Thomas appeared in several of them, always standing a respectful distance away. never hugging her, never smiling directly at the camera, almost as if he wanted proof that he had been there without looking like part of the family. Daniel's thoughts raced. Had his father lived a second life? Had he secretly supported another family for decades? The evidence seemed impossible to ignore. Even his mother struggled to hold back tears. 38 years together, she whispered. How could I not know? Daniel opened the leather journal, expecting a confession. Instead, the first page contained only one sentence. If you open this before reading the newspaper clipping, close it now. The story begins there. He searched through the folders until he found an old newspaper folded between plastic sleeves. The headline immediately caught his attention. Local carpenter saves 5-year-old girl from house fire. The article was dated 26 years earlier. Daniel stared at the photograph beneath the headline. The firefighter carrying a small child wasn't a firefighter at all. It was his father. Daniel read the article twice before saying a word. According to the report, Thomas had been driving home from work when he noticed smoke pouring from a small house on the edge of town. Before the fire department arrived, he forced open the front door and rushed inside. He managed to carry a little girl to safety, but her parents never escaped. The child's name was Grace Miller. Daniel slowly lowered the newspaper. The woman from the funeral wasn't Thomas's secret wife. She was the little girl he had pulled from the flames. His mother covered her mouth as tears filled her eyes. He never told me, she whispered. Daniel reached for another envelope. Inside was a letter written by Grace when she was 18. Dear Thomas, today I graduated. Everyone congratulated me, but the first person I wanted to thank was you. You didn't just save me from the fire. You saved me every year after it. You paid for my school when I thought I'd have to quit. You helped me when I couldn't afford rent. You stood in the audience at every graduation, always leaving before I could introduce you to anyone. I know you never wanted recognition, but I hope one day your family knows what kind of man you really are. Daniel felt a lump in his throat. The next folder contained copies of every payment Thomas had ever made: college tuition, medical expenses, rent during difficult years, even money for Grace's daughter's surgery. Every receipt carried the same note in Thomas's handwriting: anonymous. There was never a return address, never a signature, only kindness without expectation. At the bottom of the box rested one final envelope marked, "Read this last." Daniel unfolded the pages carefully. My son, if you've reached this letter, you've probably spent hours wondering whether I betrayed our family. I understand. If I had found the same documents, I might have believed it too. The truth is much simpler. The day I pulled Grace from that fire, I made a promise to her father. As the flames surrounded us, he grabbed my arm and begged me not to let his daughter grow up alone. I promised I would watch over her if he couldn't. I kept that promise the only way I knew how. I never told your mother because I feared she would think I loved someone else. I never told you because I wanted you to judge me by the way I treated people, not by stories about me. Real kindness doesn't ask for applause. It simply shows up when someone needs it. Daniel paused, unable to continue for several seconds. His mother gently wiped away her tears. He carried this alone all those years, she said, not because he didn't trust us, because he didn't want us to carry the burden with him. Daniel turned the final page. If Grace comes to my funeral, please don't let her leave as a stranger. Invite her for coffee. Listen to her story. You'll understand why I never regretted a single dollar, a single hour, or a single sacrifice. The next afternoon, Daniel called the number he found inside the journal. Grace answered on the second ring. They met at the same small cafe where Thomas used to stop every Saturday morning. Grace brought a faded photo album. Inside were pictures Daniel had never seen. His father teaching a little girl how to ride a bicycle, helping her paint her first apartment, sitting quietly in the back row at her college graduation, holding her newborn daughter for just a few seconds before handing her back with a smile. "He always said I already had one father," Grace whispered. "He never wanted to replace him. He only wanted to keep a promise." Before they left, Grace handed Daniel one last photograph. It showed Thomas standing outside the burned house the day after the fire. On the back, he had written a single sentence: "The greatest promises are the ones no one ever knows you kept." Months later, Daniel began volunteering with the local fire department's family support program, helping children who had lost everything in disasters. Every year, on the anniversary of the fire, he and Grace placed white lilies beside Thomas's grave. Visitors often asked if they were relatives. Daniel always smiled before answering, "Not by blood." Then he looked at his father's name carved into the stone and quietly added, "By a promise that outlived the man who made it." Sometimes the people we love leave behind more than memories. Sometimes they leave behind proof that the quietest lives can create the loudest legacy.